So there was a recent outage that you may have been aware of the 911 system. Seemed to be conflicting reports as to why it went down, how it went down. I heard that a fiber optic line was cut. I heard cyber attack. It seems odd to me that a fiber optic line being cut would take down the 911 system, critical response system across multiple states. I do believe it's confirmed to multiple states, and the outage lasted potentially for several hours or longer, but there was a major communication outage. So anyone at any time in any of those states that had an emergency during that time called 911 and nothing. At that point, you are your own first responder, and that's something we talk about with prepping, is being prepared when you're on your own. That's sort of the entire point of prepping, is being prepared to deal with situations on your own. And I've got some numbers here. So there's approximately 240 million 911 calls per year, which works out to 657,534 calls per day, right? So some percentage of those calls went unanswered, but it's a lot of calls. So one side, right, you jump immediately into is the self-defense side, right? So American gun owners, a study from reason.com, use firearms in self-defense about 1.7 million times per year, which works out to 4,265 times a day, or 44 times every 15 minutes. If you break that down by state, that's about 4 per hour per state. So there were several instances, more or less statistically guaranteed, in that outage where there was a self-defense shooting. Call 911, nothing happened, right? We talk about self-defense, and of course you have your self-defense tools, but this is a huge responsibility, carrying a self-defense tool. I would highly recommend that if you're going to carry anything for self-defense, knowing the statistical frequency of 44 times every 15 minutes is one, get trained, right? You don't want to just carry a gun, pull it around and start blasting. Know your laws. We've talked about self-defense insurance before. U.S. Law Shield is a great provider. Texas Law Shield is what we call it in Texas, but know your laws. Get trained. Don't just carry it around and think I'm good. A lot of things can happen. So certainly at one level of first responder, if you are prepared to accept the responsibility of carrying a self-defense tool, that's certainly an option, right? There's no guarantee you're going to call 911 and someone is always going to be there to answer the phone, but it goes more than that, right? There's more to 911 calls than just self-defense shootings. So the next one is first aid. Right? What if you were going to call an ambulance? What if you call 911 because someone sick, hurt, injured, in critical condition? And once again, nobody answers the phone because the service is down. It happened. Can't say it couldn't happen again. What's your first aid kit look like? Do you have the supplies handy to deal with an emergency first aid situation, at least long enough to potentially drive to the hospital? But really, once again, that depends on the situation, and it's not enough to have a first aid kit. Do you have first aid training? Do you know how to use the stuff? Do you know at least how to stabilize someone before you make that drive to the hospital? What if someone's bleeding? Do you know how to stop bleeding? What if someone's choking? CPR, basic first aid training. You have to get in that mindset of being your own first responder, and in that, once again, a lot of responsibility, but also, are you prepared for that? You can't wait until something happens to be like, hey, I should probably get a first aid kit, and maybe I need to know a little bit about first aid, right? Highly recommend getting that training now, right? Being prepared now. You can't wait until that happens. And of course, the other side item, people often call 911 because there's a fire. Do you even own a fire extinguisher? And I certainly have a couple of them, but I'll tell you from personal experience, I've had to put out fires before. I'm not a fireman. My dad was actually a volunteer fireman. I'm not a fireman, but I have had to try to use one of these to put out a fire before. If your house is on fire, this is not going to cut it, right? This is going to put out a small fire. It's not going to put out a whole house fire. So understand your equipment, understand the limitations of your equipment, but in the event that you wake up in the middle of the night and your house is on fire, evacuate, right? That's just my advice. Grabbing a fire extinguisher thinking you're going to put out the fire is not going to cut it. And once again, you may find yourself in a situation where you call 911 and nobody answers. It just happened, right? It just happened. So I would hope that provides some motivation for people that may be on the fence, either on prepping or at least being prepared and trying to develop those skills of self-sufficiency of being your own first responder. Because once again, you just don't know. It's hard to know what could happen, right? If it was a cyber attack, I know we've talked a lot about cyber attacks. I deal with cyber attacks all the time. They are frequent. They happen all the time. They're becoming more sophisticated with things like AI, right? Not turning this into a whole cyber war video, but I will say cyber attacks are not uncommon. They will become more common. Cyber attacks create disruptions. We've talked about that. This potentially could be that, right? It certainly looks like there was a disruption. Once again, I've read a story that says someone accidentally dug up one fiber optic cable and broke it. I do find that hard to believe that breaking a single fiber optic cable is going to take down 911 across multiple states, cities, counties. I know it happened in Texas because I actually talked to a couple different 911 dispatchers. I didn't call 911, but just people I talked to. One said, hey, it's not happening here. Another one said, no, it's happening here. All our comms are down. So I don't know how a single fiber optic cable would do that. I'm not trying to spin conspiracy theories. I think that's a different video that I'm going to be working on. Jump in some more on conspiracy theories, get those rabbit holes going. Everybody loves a good rabbit hole, and maybe it was not nefarious this time. It's certainly a possibility that something like that could happen. So focus, right? Focus on your preps. Focus on being prepared, being trained, learning those skills. Take the time. There's a lot of places you might be able to get something like a first aid class for free, right? A lot of places actually do offer that, but look up first aid classes in your area. I've taken classes in person and I've taken classes online, and no, an online first aid class is better than not taking a first aid class. It's not the same. It's really not. It might help you if you know zero about first aid and you take an online first aid class, it might help out. But highly recommend seek out something, start learning about first aid, accumulate some medical supplies, right? How do you deal with a cut? You get cut anytime. I actually have a little scar on my hand here. I accidentally was cutting something, cut my hand. That was a trip to the ER. But could you deal with that, right? Could you deal with that on your own? In this case, 911 was down. No indication hospitals were affected. So you could say, okay, I'm just going to drive to the hospital, which is what I did. I didn't call 911 when that happened. But it's not hard to imagine the possibility of a situation where maybe driving to the hospital is not an option. And apparently not calling 911 isn't always guaranteed to be an option. So same thing on fires, right? It's good to have fire extinguishers. If you can catch a small fire quickly, perhaps you can put it out. But large fire, a lot of smoke, you could hurt yourself just from smoke inhalation very quickly. Probably better to evacuate, certainly get your family out, get the kids out, get the pets out, right? You want to be smart about it, but it's being prepared, getting that mindset of what happens. You call 911, something doesn't happen, and once again on the self-defense tools, can't stress that enough. Training, discipline, and insurance is not a bad idea. Shootings do happen. I know there's a lot of states where Texas right now is a open carry state, right? You do not need a license to carry, and I'm not disagreeing with that policy, but I would urge anyone that's going to carry a self-defense tool to get training. I hope you do. Please, everybody, get some training, get an understanding of your laws, because you could find yourself in a difficult situation for a very long time. I see videos every day, you see them online, of people using a weapon inappropriately, and will likely find themselves in legal issues that will last a very long time and could be very expensive beyond the damage, right? Psychological, physical damage done by misusing a weapon. So I hope that helps out, right? Just wanted to get that out there, get you thinking about prepping. A lot of stuff going on in the world. It's crazy times, absolutely crazy times. The best thing you can do, be prepared to be your own first responder. So as always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.